There are certain mornings that do not arrive quietly, even if the world outside looks completely ordinary, and Friday, May 8th, carries that exact kind of energy. The moment the moon moves into Aquarius, something beneath the surface begins rearranging itself, and whether you have language for it yet or not, your body already knows. That strange emotional tension you have been carrying over the last few days, that restless feeling in your chest, that sense that your current reality no longer fits the person you are becoming, none of it is random. I think many people are about to realize that what they called stress was actually the beginning of a spiritual rupture, a moment where the soul can no longer tolerate living inside patterns that were never designed for its evolution. Normally, people dismiss lunar shifts because the moon changes signs so quickly, but this transit is not operating on its own. It is stepping directly into a field that has already been charged by much larger planetary movements that have been building pressure for months. And when the moon enters Aquarius during the early morning hours today, around 3:30 at night, it does not arrive gently. It immediately activates something deeply buried, something connected to your future, your identity, and the life you secretly know you were meant to live before fear convinced you to settle for something smaller. What makes this moment so powerful is not just the moon itself, it is what the moon is touching. 2 days ago, on May 6th, Pluto stationed retrograde in Aquarius, and that matters far more than most people realize. When Pluto appears to stop moving in the sky and begins its backward motion, its energy intensifies dramatically. It becomes concentrated, unavoidable, impossible to ignore. Pluto rules transformation at the deepest level. It governs the hidden structures underneath the personality, the fears we bury, the truths we suppress, the emotional survival strategies we developed just to feel accepted or safe. It rules power, endings, rebirth, obsession, control, and the parts of ourselves we often spend years pretending do not exist. So when Pluto stations retrograde, life has a way of confronting you with the exact things you've been trying not to look at. Over the past several days, many people have been carrying a heaviness they cannot fully explain. It may have shown up as emotional exhaustion, irritation, numbness, or even this quiet awareness that something in your life feels false now. Some people are beginning to recognize that certain relationships have been draining them for far too long. Others are waking up to the realization that the path they have been forcing themselves to stay committed to no longer reflects who they truly are. There are also people realizing that they have spent years shaping themselves around the expectations of others, performing versions of themselves that earned approval while slowly disconnecting them from their own truth. That pressure has not been imaginary. That is Pluto working beneath the surface, exposing fractures that can no longer remain hidden. At 5 degrees of Aquarius, Pluto retrograde has been forcing an internal reckoning, not to punish you, but to reveal where your energy has been trapped inside outdated identities and emotional conditioning. Aquarius is the sign of liberation, innovation, awakening, rebellion against unconscious programming. So Pluto retrograde in Aquarius is not interested in preserving the life you built out of fear. It wants to dismantle the internal structures that keep you disconnected from authenticity. And that process is uncomfortable, because awakening rarely feels gentle in the beginning. Before clarity arrives, there is usually disruption. Before freedom appears, there is often grief over realizing how long you betrayed yourself just to maintain stability. I think many people are standing in that emotional space right now without fully understanding why everything suddenly feels so emotionally charged. But this is where today changes everything. Because once the moon crosses into Aquarius, the emotional body becomes directly connected to Pluto's transformative force. The moon governs emotions, instincts, memory, subconscious reactions, inner needs. It moves quickly, amplifying whatever it touches. So when it approaches conjunction with a newly retrograde Pluto in Aquarius, emotions stop functioning as distractions and start functioning as revelations. Something inside you begins seeing differently. Not dramatically at first, but with a kind of cold honesty that is almost impossible to unsee once it arrives. Aquarius is not sentimental energy. It is detached, observant, intellectual, capable of stepping outside emotional chaos long enough to recognize the deeper pattern underneath it. That is why this transit feels so different. Instead of drowning you in emotional overwhelm, this Moon-Pluto connection can create a shocking level of clarity. It is the kind of clarity that suddenly makes your current reality impossible to rationalize anymore. You may find yourself looking at a situation you tolerated for years and wondering why you accepted it for so long. You may recognize that certain environments have been shrinking you instead of supporting your growth. You may realize that the version of your future you have been chasing was built from obligation rather than alignment. And when that realization lands, it changes something permanently. Because once consciousness expands, you cannot fully return to unconscious living again. That is the breakthrough hidden inside this transit. Not emotional collapse, but emotional awakening. Not chaos for the sake of destruction, but the moment your inner world becomes honest enough to admit that you deserve more than survival. I think this is why so many people feel like something is about to snap. In reality, what is breaking is not your life. It is the illusion that you can continue abandoning yourself without consequences. The moon entering Aquarius is illuminating the distance between who you have been and who you are becoming. And Pluto retrograde is demanding that you stop pretending the distance does not exist. There is a future trying to emerge through you now, but it cannot fully arrive while you remain emotionally attached to identities, expectations, and realities that no longer reflect your truth. And the deeper this transit unfolds throughout the day, the harder it becomes to ignore the voice inside you that already knows it is time for something to change. What makes this weekend so unsettling is that the changes unfolding now are not arriving in obvious ways at first. They begin like a strange interruption in the storyline of your life. A conversation you did not expect to have, a realization that appears out of nowhere, a piece of information that suddenly rearranges your understanding of everything you thought was stable. And I need you to understand that when I say plot twist, I'm not speaking metaphorically just to sound dramatic. I genuinely believe many people are standing at the edge of a moment where the narrative they have been emotionally attached to begins collapsing in real time. The reason this energy feels so unpredictable is because the moon moving through Aquarius right now is not acting alone. It is operating under the influence of Uranus, the modern ruler of Aquarius. And Uranus has already been preparing the atmosphere for disruption ever since it entered Gemini on April 25th. That ingress changed the energetic landscape immediately. Uranus is the planet of shocks, awakenings, rebellion, breakthroughs, sudden reversals, and events that arrive without warning. Gemini moves quickly, mentally and verbally. It governs communication, information exchange, perception, ideas, news, messages, and the speed at which reality can shift through one single realization. So when Uranus enters Gemini, life starts moving differently. Information begins arriving faster than people can emotionally process it. Conversations become catalysts. Unexpected truths emerge through ordinary moments. A single sentence can completely alter someone's future because Gemini rules the way the mind interprets reality itself. Now connect that to the moon entering Aquarius today. Aquarius already carries Uranian energy because Uranus rules it in modern astrology. So this lunar transit is essentially channeling Uranus directly into the emotional body. That means the emotional revelations people are experiencing right now are not slow or gradual. They are sudden, jarring, electrifying. You may wake up feeling one way and by the end of the day realize your perspective has permanently changed. Some people are going to receive information over the next several days that forces them to reevaluate everything they believed about a relationship, a career, a future plan, or even themselves. Others may not hear external news at all. but instead experience what feels like an internal lightning strike, a sudden moment where confusion disappears and clarity arrives all at once. Those are the kinds of Uranian breakthroughs this transit can produce. And what makes this even more important is the fact that the groundwork for these revelations was already laid earlier this week. On May the 5th, Mercury in Taurus formed a square to Pluto. That aspect matters because Mercury governs communication, thinking patterns, data, conversations, messages, and perception itself. Pluto governs what is hidden beneath the surface, what has been buried, denied, controlled, or concealed. When Mercury clashes with Pluto through a square, uncomfortable truths rise into consciousness. Secrets become harder to contain. Conversations intensify. Information surfaces that forces psychological confrontation. Even if nothing dramatic happened externally for you on May 5th, many people felt a shift internally, like something underneath the surface of reality no longer felt trustworthy. That square began exposing the truth, but exposure alone is not enough. What happens now with the moon in Aquarius is that the emotional body begins integrating what the mind already sensed earlier in the week. Suddenly, the truth becomes undeniable because you can feel it emotionally instead of merely analyzing it intellectually. That is the real plot twist unfolding now. Not random chaos, but the realization that the direction you thought your life was heading may no longer align with who you are becoming. And this energy keeps building because the story does not stop with the moon conjunct Pluto. On Saturday, May 9th, the last quarter moon arrives at 19 degrees of Aquarius, and last quarter moons are rarely passive experiences. They represent the crisis point in the lunar cycle, the moment where action becomes unavoidable. This is the phase where reality pressures you to release what is no longer sustainable, so movement can finally occur. The emotional tension becomes impossible to ignore, because the moon in Aquarius forms a square to the sun in Taurus, creating friction between two fixed energies that want completely different things. Taurus seeks stability, familiarity, comfort, security, routine, and preservation. It wants to protect what already exists. Aquarius, on the other hand, is the force of evolution. It refuses stagnation. It demands liberation from systems, identities, and emotional attachments that prevent growth. So this square creates an internal battle between the part of you that wants to stay safe and the part of you that already knows staying where you are is slowly suffocating your spirit. And I think that is why this weekend may feel emotionally overwhelming for so many people. Because for a long time, many have been standing at the threshold of change while still trying to negotiate with the past. They have sensed the need to move forward, but fear kept them emotionally attached to what felt familiar. This last quarter moon changes the equation because it intensifies discomfort to the point where remaining stagnant begins hurting more than risking transformation. That is the turning point. Sometimes the universe does not create movement by making the future look safer. Sometimes it creates movement by making the present impossible to tolerate any longer. And honestly, I think that is exactly what this weekend is doing. It is acting like a cosmic force, pushing people toward realities they were too afraid to claim before. Terrifying because change always threatens the identity. Liberating because the soul recognizes when it is finally moving toward truth. What becomes even more intense is that this energy is not affecting everyone equally. There are 3 signs standing directly inside the center of this pressure field: Taurus, Scorpio, and Aquarius. If your sun, moon, or rising sign falls into any of these fixed signs, this weekend may feel deeply personal. The geometry of these transits is activating your life directly. These are the individuals most likely to experience dramatic emotional revelations, sudden shifts in direction, plot twists that alter long-term plans, and moments where the illusion of certainty breaks apart. Taurus especially is standing at an emotional crossroads right now. And honestly, if you are a Taurus or Taurus rising, this period may feel exhausting because you have already spent the last 7 years moving through one of the most destabilizing cycles imaginable. Uranus has been traveling through your sign during that entire period, and Uranus does not preserve comfort, it dismantles it. Taurus naturally seeks security, permanence, predictability, and something solid enough to trust long-term. But Uranus moving through Taurus over these 7 years has continuously disrupted whatever you tried to cling to for stability. Many Taurus individuals have watched relationships shift unexpectedly, careers transform suddenly, identities evolve beyond recognition, and old definitions of safety collapse repeatedly. And now, with the Moon activating Aquarius, while the last quarter square intensifies this tension, many Taurus placements are reaching a moment where they can no longer confuse false security with genuine fulfillment. Because there is a difference between being safe and being alive. And I think this weekend is forcing many Taurus individuals to recognize that some of the structures they fought hardest to preserve were actually preventing the future from arriving. For Taurus, I think the exhaustion runs deeper than most people around you even realize. Over the last 7 years, with Uranus moving through your sign, life has probably felt like standing on shifting ground while trying desperately to build something permanent. Every time you thought you finally found stability, something unexpected interrupted it. Sudden endings, abrupt changes, losses you never anticipated, situations unraveling that once felt guaranteed, all of it forced you to adapt in ways that likely felt unnatural for you. Taurus energy wants peace, consistency, something dependable enough to trust long-term. But Uranus does not allow comfort to remain untouched. It destabilizes whatever has become stagnant, even when that stagnation feels emotionally safer than change. So when Uranus finally exited your sign in late April, I think many Taurus placements experienced a brief moment of relief, almost like finally surfacing for air after surviving years underwater. There may have been a part of you that thought the chaos was finally over, that maybe now life could quiet down and become predictable again. But what this Aquarius moon is revealing is that the real transformation was never only about external disruption. It was always preparing you for an internal awakening about the direction of your life itself. Because now the moon moving through Aquarius is activating Pluto in your 10th house, the part of the chart connected to career, public identity, reputation, purpose, and the role you occupy in the world. And I think this is where things become emotionally undeniable. Many Taurus individuals are beginning to recognize that the path they have been investing their energy into may not actually belong to them anymore. Some have stayed in careers that provide financial stability while quietly draining their spirit every single day. Others pursued professional goals because they look respectable, because family expectations shaped the definition of success, because the image of achievement mattered more than emotional fulfillment. There are also Taurus placements who built entire identities around being dependable, successful, responsible, admired, only to realize they no longer recognize themselves underneath the performance. That realization can feel terrifying because Taurus naturally associates security with survival. Walking away from what is familiar can feel like risking everything. But this weekend carries a deeper truth that many Taurus placements can no longer avoid. The structure you believed was protecting you may actually be the thing limiting your evolution. The job, the role, the image, the safe path, the carefully maintained stability, it may have become a prison disguised as security. And I think the emotional intensity of this Aquarius moon conjunct Pluto is forcing Taurus individuals to finally see that clearly. Not through emotional drama, but through stark awareness. The kind of realization where you suddenly understand that your soul has been asking for freedom for much longer than your mind wanted to admit. And yes, there is fear in that. Fear of disappointing people, fear of financial instability, fear of abandoning years of effort, fear of stepping outside the identity that made you feel safe. But what I keep feeling around this transit is that what leaves your life now is not true stability. It is false stability, the kind built on emotional compromise and silent self-betrayal. The path opening ahead may feel uncertain at first, but it carries something far more valuable than comfort. It carries authenticity. And eventually, authenticity creates a form of fulfillment that external approval never could. Scorpio. Your experience this weekend feels even more emotionally raw because Pluto is your ruling planet, which means when Pluto stations retrograde, you do not observe the transformation from a distance, you feel it inside your body. The intensity becomes deeply personal. And with this Aquarius Moon activating your fourth house, the emotional material surfacing now reaches into the most private layers of your life. The fourth house governs home, roots, family dynamics, childhood conditioning, emotional foundations, and the hidden psychological patterns inherited across generations. This is where emotional memory lives. It is where loyalty, attachment, grief, and survival instincts become embedded long before we fully understand them. And I think what is happening for many Scorpio placements right now is that something old is finally reaching its breaking point. There may be family dynamics you have tolerated for years out of obligation or guilt, emotional burdens you carried because you believed it was your responsibility to hold everyone together. Some Scorpios are confronting ancestral pain, inherited patterns of suffering, control, silence, emotional suppression, or sacrifice that were passed down through generations but were never truly theirs to continue carrying. Others may be facing the reality that certain relationships or living situations have quietly depleted them for far too long. Scorpio energy is incredibly resilient. You are capable of surviving emotional conditions that would completely destroy other people. Your ability to transform pain into strength is extraordinary. But one of the shadow sides of Scorpio is remaining loyal to suffering simply because you know how to endure it. And I think this weekend changes that dynamic permanently. Because the Aquarius Moon conjunct Pluto is exposing the difference between endurance and emotional freedom. Just because you can survive inside dysfunction does not mean you are meant to remain there forever. I think many Scorpio placements are approaching a moment where their emotional tolerance finally collapses. Not dramatically at first, but with sudden certainty. Something inside you may simply decide, enough. The emotional exhaustion becomes impossible to negotiate with any longer. You may realize overnight that you no longer have the capacity to keep sacrificing yourself for environments that continuously drain your spirit. And that realization may create external disruption. Some people may need to establish boundaries that others react badly to. Some may walk away from family expectations that once controlled them. Others may physically leave environments that have emotionally suffocated them for years. To outsiders, it may appear abrupt. But internally, this decision has likely been forming beneath the surface for a very long time. The real plot twist for Scorpio is how quickly liberation arrives once you stop carrying emotional weight that never belonged to you in the first place. The moment you release the need to save everyone else at the cost of yourself, something inside you begins breathing again. And that is the deeper transformation unfolding here. Not punishment, not destruction, but reclamation of emotional sovereignty. Aquarius. This energy is hitting you at the deepest possible level, because all of these transits are unfolding directly inside your sign, inside your first house of identity, selfhood, physical presence, and the version of yourself you project into the world. Pluto, moving through Aquarius, has already been initiating a profound psychological excavation. It has been stripping away masks, exposing insecurities, forcing confrontation with the parts of yourself you may have spent years intellectualizing instead of emotionally facing. Aquarius energy often survives by observing emotions from a distance, by staying detached enough to avoid vulnerability. But Pluto does not allow distance forever. It drags hidden truths into consciousness until transformation becomes unavoidable. And now, with the Moon entering Aquarius and moving toward Pluto, the emotional body becomes fully involved in this process. This is not only about external change for you, this is about the rebirth of identity itself. Many Aquarius placements are realizing that the person they have been trying to be no longer aligns with who they truly are becoming underneath the surface. There may be old versions of yourself you have outgrown, but continued performing because they felt familiar. Certain social roles, friendships, ambitions, or personal narratives may suddenly feel emotionally disconnected from your truth. And what makes this weekend so powerful is that the clarity arriving now is deeply personal. You are not just questioning circumstances, you are questioning the entire framework through which you have defined yourself. That can feel destabilizing at first, because identity transformation often feels like ego death before it feels like liberation. But I think what Pluto retrograde in Aquarius is ultimately teaching you is that your future cannot emerge while you continue clinging to outdated versions of yourself simply because they once helped you survive. Something new is trying to be born through you now, and the deeper this transit unfolds, the harder it becomes to ignore the truth of who you actually are beneath all the conditioning, expectations, and emotional armor you once believed you needed to protect yourself. And now that the Moon has entered Aquarius and moved toward Pluto, all of the internal pressure that has been building beneath the surface is becoming impossible for Aquarius placements to compartmentalize anymore. I think what many Aquarius individuals are experiencing right now is not just emotional intensity, but a total redefinition of identity itself. This is deeper than changing your mind about something. This is the kind of transformation that alters how you see yourself when you look in the mirror, how you relate to your own truth, and how willing you are to continue performing versions of yourself that no longer feel alive. Aquarius energy naturally gravitates toward objectivity. You are often the observer in the room, the thinker, the visionary, the person focused on the collective, on innovation, on systems, on ideas, larger than personal emotion. And while that intellectual distance can be a gift, it can also become armor. Sometimes, detachment becomes a strategy for avoiding emotional vulnerability. Sometimes staying focused on the future or the collective prevents you from fully confronting your own desires, your own wounds, your own need to be seen authentically instead of conceptually. But Pluto moving through your first house does not allow emotional avoidance forever. It excavates the hidden material underneath the personality. It forces buried truths to rise into consciousness until the masks become too heavy to keep wearing. And now this Moon conjunct Pluto is illuminating everything all at once. I think many Aquarius placements are about to surprise the people around them because something inside them has reached the point where suppression is no longer sustainable. There may be sudden changes in appearance, abrupt decisions that confuse others, or a dramatic break away from communities, friendships, or social circles that once felt central to your identity. Some Aquarius individuals may suddenly speak truths they have hidden for years because they feared rejection or misunderstanding. Others may realize they have spent too much time shaping themselves around group expectations while slowly disconnecting from their individuality. What makes this energy so powerful is that it is not asking you to become someone new. It is asking you to stop pretending to be someone you are not. And that can be deeply disruptive because people become attached to the version of you that made them comfortable. When you begin embodying your authentic self more openly, not everyone will understand it. Some people may react with confusion. Others may project disappointment because your transformation challenges the image they created of you in their own mind. But I think this weekend is teaching Aquarius placements something essential about freedom. Authenticity often requires disappointing the expectations that kept you emotionally imprisoned. The real breakthrough happening now is not external validation. It is the moment you stop needing permission to exist truthfully. This is radical self-recognition, a liberation from social masks, intellectual defenses, and identities built for survival rather than fulfillment. And while the process may initially feel isolating, I truly believe many Aquarius placements will eventually look back on this weekend as the moment they finally stopped shrinking themselves to fit environments they had already spiritually outgrown. For the rest of the signs, the energy unfolding now still carries significant emotional impact, even if it manifests differently. Aries, this Aquarius Moon is moving through your 11th house, bringing transformation to friendships, communities, networks, and long-term goals. I think many Aries placements are beginning to recognize that certain social circles no longer align with the direction their life is heading. There may be sudden separations from groups, or an awareness that the ambitions you once pursued no longer reflect your current values. Gemini, with Uranus already moving through your sign after entering Gemini on April 25th, life is accelerating rapidly for you. This moon activates your 9th house, the area connected to beliefs, philosophy, higher learning, expansion, and perspective. I think many Gemini placements are experiencing a dramatic shift in worldview. Conversations, information, or realizations may completely change the way you see your future, opening possibilities you did not previously consider accessible. Cancer. This energy activates your 8th house, bringing attention to intimacy, shared resources, emotional entanglements, and psychological transformation. Boundaries around finances, trust, or emotional dependency may become necessary now. I think many Cancer placements are realizing they need to reclaim power in situations where emotional imbalance has existed for too long. Leo, the Aquarius Moon, moves through your 7th house of partnerships and close relationships. For many Leos, the plot twist arrives through another person. There may be revelations within a relationship, sudden clarity about unhealthy dynamics, or emotional breakthroughs that force change within important connections. Virgo, your 6th house is being activated, bringing transformation to routines, health, work environments, and the way you manage daily energy. I think many Virgos are beginning to understand that their current lifestyle structures are unsustainable. Sudden changes to schedules, habits, or work patterns may emerge because your body and mind are demanding a healthier alignment. Libra, this moon activates your 5th house, the part of the chart connected to creativity, self-expression, romance, joy, and passion. Unexpected inspiration may arrive quickly now. Some Libras may experience shifts in romantic dynamics, while others rediscover parts of themselves they abandoned in order to maintain harmony with others. Sagittarius, your 3rd house is illuminated, accelerating communication, local movement, conversations, and mental processing. Information is moving quickly around you right now, and I think certain conversations over this weekend may completely reshape the way you interpret an important situation. Capricorn. This Aquarius energy enters your 2nd house of money, values, resources, and self-worth. I think many Capricorns are beginning to reassess what security truly means to them. There may be realizations that financial stability alone cannot compensate for emotional emptiness or spiritual disconnection. Pisces. The moon activates your 12th house, making this transit deeply internal, spiritual, and psychologically profound. Old karmic cycles may be dissolving beneath the surface. Dreams may intensify. Intuition may become unusually strong. Many Pisces placements are likely receiving emotional insight through subtle spiritual experiences rather than obvious external events. And after everything unfolding this weekend, the most important question becomes how to move through this energy consciously instead of simply reacting to it unconsciously. Because I do not think these transits are happening randomly. I think they are offering an opportunity for awakening, but awakening becomes much more painful when resisted. The first thing I would say is do not fight the discomfort surfacing now. I know that sounds difficult. especially for the fixed signs carrying the heaviest pressure through this Aquarius and Pluto activation. But discomfort is often the emotional signal that transformation has already begun. Many people spend years trying to numb the very feelings that are attempting to guide them toward a more authentic life. This weekend is not exposing discomfort to punish you. It is exposing it, because something inside you can no longer tolerate living disconnected from your truth. And the deeper this energy unfolds, the clearer it becomes that what feels uncomfortable now may actually be the doorway leading you toward the version of your life that has been trying to emerge all along. But the discomfort is information. It's showing you exactly what needs to change. If something feels unbearable this weekend, ask yourself, what is this showing me about my life? What am I being asked to release? What am I being called toward? Second, trust your sudden insights. If you have a flash of clarity, a moment where you just know something is true, even if you can't explain it logically, don't second-guess it. That's the Aquarius energy, giving you direct access to higher knowing. And third, be willing to make the scary move. The plot twist only happens if you're willing to step into the unknown. If you cling to what's familiar out of fear, you're going to miss the opportunity for real transformation. This isn't about being reckless. It's about being brave enough to choose authenticity over comfort, to choose your real future over the safe future you thought you were supposed to want. The real future is waiting. Here's what I really believe is happening. For months, maybe years, you've been on a certain path, and maybe that path made sense at the time. Maybe it was what you wanted, or what you thought you should want, or what seemed like the logical next step. But somewhere along the way, that path stopped being authentic. It stopped aligning with who you're actually becoming. And yet you stayed on it because changing course felt too hard, too scary, too uncertain. This Aquarius moon breaking you free isn't a punishment. It's not the universe being cruel. I really believe it's grace. It's the cosmos saying, hey, you've been stuck for too long. You've been tolerating things that are killing your spirit, and we love you too much to let you keep doing that. The plot twist, the sudden shift, the uncomfortable realization, it's all in service of getting you back on your real path, the one that's actually aligned with your soul's purpose, not just your ego's fears. And, yeah, it might be messy. Change usually is. You might have to have hard conversations. You might have to disappoint people. You might have to let go of things you thought you needed. But on the other side of that, freedom, clarity, a life that actually feels like yours. All right? If you've made it all the way to the end of this, thank you so much for being here. If this resonated with you, I'd really love it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps me reach more people who might need to hear this. Remember, whatever you're going through this weekend, you're not alone. We're all in this together. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.